I did that on vaping, on teenage vaping specifically.
People were vaping in middle school. Wow.
In the beginning of high school, I was a really research-oriented kid. I was really involved in research and science specifically. So I was a speaker first. I went to the TEDx Event listing page, and then I just applied in cold email like a lot of different people in my general area. TEDx events can only positively benefit the community, I feel like. I would definitely want them to start, much more in advance, especially if it's the first event. Also, just taking time to think and reflect on your own experiences, because I feel like everyone has really important experiences and a very unique perspective that they can share. So there's this person who's talking about procrastination.
Hello, hello, hello. I am here with someone. I will let him introduce himself, but he is a TEDx organizer, and I will give him the floor to kind of introduce himself, and we will go, as we always do, with a genuine conversation full of questions that I'm personally curious with, but I also know you probably are looking for answers for as well, and we'll go from there. So go ahead and introduce yourself, and what was the TEDx talk that you organized?
So I'm Abhinav Avvaru. I'm from Nashua, New Hampshire. I'm a senior in high school. I organized 2 TEDx events in TEDx Nashua High School South, and I also spoke at both of the events, and I also spoke at another event. So I spoke at 3 separate talks, and yeah, that's me.
Cool. And so I think one thing that I first kind of want to ask about, and it's very cool that you're a senior in high school, doing what you're doing already doing. That's very impressive. Definitely shows you're on a very cool path for life, professionally and personally, right? What kind of got you started on this, I guess, road less traveled path that you decided to take for yourself?
Yeah, so honestly, it actually started off with in the beginning of high school. I was a really research-oriented kid. I was really involved in research and science specifically. So I hadn't really been exposed to TEDx or even speaking in general. But kind of throughout my research experiences, I was exposed to a lot of different cool technologies and a lot of interesting problems. But one thing I really noticed was that, writing a research paper or maybe talking to a couple people about these cool technologies or these different problems wasn't really getting all the attention or how important these issues or these technologies are, out there. And I was really looking for a way to kind of, broaden my impact, talk to my community, especially about issues that are both important to me and I feel like to my community, and to share my experiences. And so that kind of is what got me into TEDx and started my journey into becoming a speaker and an organizer.
Cool. Were you a speaker first, or were you an organizer first?
So I was a speaker first. Honestly, when I just started getting into my journey, I went to the TEDx event listing page, and then I just applied in cold email like a lot of different people in my general area. And that's how I sort of started my speaking journey. I had the opportunity to speak at high school that was 20 minutes away from me. So yeah.
Very cool. And so you started as a speaker. What was that kind of journey for you to go from TEDx speaker to TEDx organizer? What did that bridge look like for you?
Yes. In my event, actually, the first one that I went to, I was kind of really amazed by, that sense of community. And I really liked seeing all these people very passionate about what they wanted to talk about and being able to talk to a lot of people, especially in that high school. And so that kind of is what started me into becoming an organizer. That transition kind of happened because I wanted to bring that community to my school community as well. Yeah.
Cool. And how did you go about the process coming up with your first idea worth spreading that you spoke on? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so it was actually my first research project. I did that on vaping, on teenage vaping specifically. And so I sort of drew in from some of my experiences in middle school, seeing a lot of people vaping in my middle school, just walking to the bathroom and just being exposed to a bunch of people just casually vaping in between classrooms. And so then throughout my research, I kind of conducted a research project on actually detecting vaping and installing potentially vape detectors in schools. And that's kind of what transitioned me into my first talk.
People were vaping in middle school. Middle school, they're what, 10, 11, 12, right?
It's like 12 to 14, 15.
Right. Okay. Wow. This was in New Hampshire. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, in 1 to 2 sentences, what was your idea worth spreading that you spoke on?
So I just talked about the harms of teenage vaping and what we can do to stop that.
Cool. And when you made that decision to organize a TEDx event, what did that journey look like for you? Because I know a lot of organizers that I talk to, it's kind of like starting in business, right? You envision this amazing TEDx talk, it'll be amazing, kind of the what we call uninformed optimism, and then oh, it's actually really hard. Oh my goodness, I gotta do this, and this, and then it's like, Oh man, you kind of slouch down, and then the whole path goes from there, right? So what did that journey look like for you?
So honestly, originally I tried to do a lot of this stuff myself. And then I started to realize, this is a lot of work. I needed a very good team behind me. And so then I started to talk to a lot of my close friends who were also very interested in doing this. And then I was able to sort of just break things down into more individual concepts, like, having maybe a couple of people work on running the social media, a couple of people working on booking like the auditorium or a camera crew, and other people just recruiting different speakers, and overall just getting this TEDx event out there into my community. And so I think that transition was a really big thing because, I came to it just being like, okay, I think I can do a lot of this myself, but I think that transition to finding a good team and realizing, okay, this is really big was very important for me.
How did you go about finding the best team members as possible?
So I started off with, just talking to my friends and then having them sort of, it was like one or two people that I was close with that would be definitely willing to put a lot of time into this. And then we started talking to people around different classes in my school, and just like, overall talking to a lot of people about TEDx, trying to see who's interested. And that's kind of how we got our team.
Well, I'll ask you this question because I know a lot of people are curious about this. How did you go about choosing the ideas worth spreading for your TEDx speakers at your event to speak on?
Yeah, so we actually had a very long application and we had people apply specifically to the event. It was based on the responses to the questions, and also we had people post a video just on for us to see their speaking style. And that was also a very big factor. We looked at the overall responses. We looked at, how much potential does it have to really be an important idea. We thought every idea applied was very important, but it was pretty difficult to cut it down to, like, say, the 8 that we wanted to. And we also looked at how people seemed in their videos, like how prepared they looked, how we thought they could be as a speaker. And that's kind of how we looked at it, actually.
And were all the speakers students at your high school? Were some of them professors? Were some of them parents? Were some of them people from other places that flew in or drove in? What did that look like?
So for my first event, we were looking for a more school-centered one. So this one was June of 2023. This event, we had more school speakers. We wanted a couple of outside speakers as well, but this one was more student-led and student-predominated. But then my second event that I organized in fall of 2023 in October, we were just looking at which would be the best idea and which would be most impactful in our community. So that one actually tended to have a little bit more outside speakers than the first one.
And of all of these ideas and these TED Talks or TEDx Talks that you saw spoken on, which one sticks with you the most today and why?
Okay, so that's a good question. Honestly, I'm gonna go with the first event that I attended. I did not organize this event, but I was a speaker there. So there's this person who's talking about procrastination. Actually, it was a little bit similar to, I'm not sure if you've seen Tim Urban's talk on procrastination. It was a little bit similar to that, but he was talking more about his own experiences. That definitely resounded with me a lot, and I really liked that. I could see, like, a lot of people were really engaged with that talk. I know it did really good on YouTube too. And so, yeah, I think his name was Karthikeya Brahmbhatt. He had a very good talk.
You mentioned did good on YouTube. So that's one thing that I've noticed too. Do you think I've asked a few different organizers, how do you measure the impact that the TEDx talks from your TEDx event have? How do you see YouTube and the engagement the TEDx talks that have gone from your event onto YouTube reflect the value of the idea we're spreading and the talk?
So I think that in some cases, like where it does really blow up, I think that's definitely a very good positive indication. But I've also seen a lot of good talks that maybe haven't really blown up that much, or haven't really, gotten those thousands of views. And honestly, I think it's a good indication of, if in a positive manner it blows up, I think that's a good indication that it was a very good talk. But if it doesn't blow up, I don't think that means that it's like a not good talk either. I think it honestly depends a lot more on the YouTube algorithm and maybe how good, the first 10 seconds might be.
Mm. Now, this is one thing that I'm personally curious about. You, especially being on this path that you're on, being a senior in high school, which I give you huge kudos for that. It's very impressive. What do you think is the reasoning that not all high schoolers have this kind of mindset and this ambition to do these kinds of things?
Honestly, I think a lot of people do have ambition to do a lot of big things. I think it comes down to, say, the opportunities that might be present in high schools or in, other places. It's a little bit harder without having, say, people like ahead of you doing something. Like I know there's people that I knew from beforehand that were doing TED Talks as well. That's one of the bigger reasons why I knew this platform was, very attainable and, something that I could accomplish as well. I think there's definitely just that lack of opportunity, but I do think that there's definitely a lot of people that are very passionate and ambitious to be doing TED Talks. And I think that's one of the things that I was able to really discover a lot while as an organizer, because, some of these people that, I was able to give a platform to talk to, they might not have been able to if I'd started the TEDx. And I was really like impressed by a lot of their talks.
How did it feel for you seeing these speakers that you were able to find and help nurture their idea, help nurture their talk, coach them maybe, or help find people to coach them, whatever it was, when they got on stage and they delivered kick-ass talks that you saw the audience got impact from? How did it feel for you?
It felt amazing because honestly, our event was like, it was a very long process. It was over a year of effort. It was great, just to see all these people, like people that I became close with during the TEDx process, people that honestly I could say were very good friends of mine too. Just being able to go there and deliver a talk to a pretty large audience, it felt really good.
That's awesome. And how far in advance did you start selecting your speakers? I know you mentioned a year. What did the kind of idea curation or speaker curation process look like for you and your team?
Okay, so the first event we had a lot more time. So we began selecting speakers and finalized speaker selection around February, so 4 months before the June event. It looked a little bit different for the fall event because that was a little bit more of a shorter timeline where we finalized speakers around a month before. Yeah, so those were honestly two a little bit different events, but
Gotcha. What would you want other people that are considering organizing a TEDx event, but they're kind of on the fence? What would you want those people to know?
I'd want them to definitely go for it for sure. TEDx events can only positively benefit the community, I feel like. I would definitely want them to start, much more in advance, especially if it's the first event, getting that experience and going through those road bumps. And I'd also really want them to know to kind of, form your team earlier rather than later. I feel like TEDx is a very big culmination of a community, a culmination of a lot of people. And, the more people there are, the better the event is.
Hmm. And what are your plans for your future with TEDx? I know you said you're a senior. You're graduating in like 6 months, right? What is your plan for TEDx and in your future?
Yeah, so we're actually hoping to start and host another TEDx event in my high school, June of 2024. So that'll be actually right around graduation. When I know what my plans are for college, I'm hoping to attend next year. I definitely want to really get involved in the TEDx there. Whether if they have a TEDx, I definitely want to get involved in it. But if they don't have a TEDx, I really want to start TEDx really in that college and bring that sense of community to where I'm going. And then beyond college, I just want to keep staying within TEDx. Even if I'm working, say, a job, I want to, stay involved in a TEDx event in the local community, or even, staying in TEDx through my high school, or still staying very active with my psychologist TEDx.
Very cool. And I mean, the skills that you've learned as far as how to organize a TED Talk, a TEDx event, they are very valuable, right? No matter where you take them, whether that's professional career of some kind or whatever you choose, right? And I think for people, employers looking to hire, they see that and they think, oh, this guy he organized a TEDx event. That's a little bit more significant than getting A's in classes. That's very impressive. When are you going about selecting speakers for your talk in 6 months?
So we're just in the planning phase right now. We hope to release the application around, mid January, and then we'd want ideally to give people a month or two to actually apply. And then usually for us, speaker selection takes around like 3 or 4 days to maybe a week because we spend a lot of time into it, and it's pretty quick because we spend a lot of time into those couple of days. So we'd hope to kind of get a speaker lineup around early to mid March. That would be ideal for a June event timeline.
Gotcha. And what does your audience look like as far as the people that come? Is it only people at your high school, or do people from outside, they're allowed to buy tickets and come in, or what does that kind of look like as far as the audience members of your talk?
Yeah, so we actually don't charge money for any tickets, so anyone really can enter. Typically, I think in our audiences in the past, I've noticed more people from the school, but there have been people the town. And that's definitely one area, honestly, which we want to further improve on in the next event, which is engaging more and more people from the town as well, not just, predominantly from the school. But yeah.
Do you think if you get more speakers from outside your school, that could engage more people from outside your school as far as the audience?
Yeah, so with the fall 2023 event, I think we saw a little bit more of a diverse audience as compared to the June 2023 event because we had a lot more outside speakers. So I think, yeah, that would definitely overall enhance the event.
Oh, awesome. And what do you see happening with the future of not your personal future with TED, but where do you see TEDx Talks and TEDx as a organization going in the future?
Well, I see it like what it is right now, which is very important to spreading a lot of important ideas. I feel like it will stay kind of in that way. I feel like definitely with YouTube and all that, I think the overall platform of TEDx will probably stay the same in a very big way. But I feel like more talks might get more around media and things like that, definitely because of YouTube and other social media platforms where snippets of talks might be shared.
For future speakers that are trying to come up with an idea or spreading, or speakers that they want to give a TED talk or TEDx talk, but they don't know what ideas they have, what message do you have for them?
So I really want them to honestly just sit down and just write whatever. Like that's one thing that I feel like is really important for me in any sort of process, whether it be, making a TEDx or any creative writing type assignment, just like word spamming or just like brain dumping. That's definitely something that I feel like is really good. I feel like also just taking time to like think and reflect on your own experiences because I feel like everyone has really important experiences and a very unique perspective that they can share and that would impact a lot of people. And so I think just taking that time to maybe brain dump and just look inside yourself and find something that you're very passionate about or something that you feel like could change a lot of lives or, is very interesting for people to hear. I feel like that's very important for new speakers to know.
And what do you feel the best, most impactful talks that you've seen on your TEDx stage or even other TEDx events that you've attended? What has been the pattern of those talks that has differentiated them from other talks that I've given that you've noticed?
I feel like they're very outside the norm. Like they're not going to stick to that structured technique or structured talk. A great example would be I mentioned this before, Tim Urban's talk. He talked about all sorts of crazy stuff that, it's just not the norm. And I think a lot of the stuff that's really good is also something relating to the personal experience, being able to, talk about something that's very captivating about yourself. Like, I'm going to talk about Tim Urban again, but he talked about how he procrastinated on his paper, senior thesis paper, for like basically an entire year and and how that really was not good. And I feel like that's definitely a big aspect as well.
What would be valuable for TEDx organizers like yourself to have or know before organizing their talk? Like, what knowledge would have been useful for you to know before you went through organizing it, went through curating it, and all those kinds of things?
Honestly, I think one thing that they should know is this isn't something that, can be done overnight. Organizers are going to have to put in their time and effort, every single day. And they're going to have to make it a very high priority. And yeah, I think that and just I said it before, finding a very good team that shares your passion of creating this TEDx platform is also really important.
How many hours of your time would you say your second talk that you organized took?
My second talk or my second event?
Event, excuse me. Yeah, second event you organized.
Probably around 1 to 2 hours a day. I would just set the time when I came back from school and just work on organizing and things I needed to do for the week.
1 to 2 hours a day for how many days?
I'd say around 2 months, 2.5 months.
Okay, cool. And then for this one, I'm personally curious about what have. So I had one of my business partners. He's a really data focused guy, and so he was curious. He said, "Okay, what value does even giving a TEDx talk have for?" Because we know what it does for the audience, for the people that view it. I mean, you mentioned the Tim Urban talk, all the value you got from that as an audience member and as a viewer. What value does it give the speakers, the TEDx speakers? Is it credibility? Is it authority? Is it impact? Because we talked to a lot of them actually, and about 8 out of 10 we talked to said they saw no difference in their life after they gave their event, after they gave their TEDx talk. So what would you say is what do you think is missing as far as systems and processes to help TEDx speakers, kind of get value from delivering all that value that they were able to give, besides just the incredible fulfillment that they've gotten from seeing comments on their YouTube channel or people coming up to them in public saying, "Oh, I saw your talk. Thank you so much for giving that talk." Besides those things, what could be done to, I guess, reward the TEDx speakers for the immense value that they provide?
That's actually an interesting question. In all honesty, I've really liked, so for the most part, for me, I got a lot of happiness from just like, as you mentioned, from YouTube comments, from seeing, my audience's reaction. But in all honesty, I think there's not much that could be done, at least off the top of my head, to really change that process. I feel like one thing, maybe hard to give multiple TED Talks, or to give, TED Talks maybe on the same thing in a different location. Maybe that could be a little bit altered. That would be nice. And maybe have only one of those TED Talks being posted on YouTube to have more people be able to deliver this talk to a lot of different audiences. I'd say that's one thing, but in all honesty, I can't really think of anything else.
An interesting idea that like the ability to deliver the same TED Talk at separate events, except not have it posted on the YouTube channel at the second or third or fourth one that they give it at. That's really interesting. How did you, I don't want to say deal with, but how did you work in congruency with the TEDx regulations at your TEDx event? How did you go about managing the regulations and your event?
So basically, for talks or for the actual event?
Let's say both.
Okay, so for talks, me and one of my other good buddies that was running the event, we'd make sure to check each and every talk beforehand. For any type of science-driven talk, we check the science. We'd also make sure one of the biggest TED guidelines was having no political or religious agendas being pushed. That's something just us two would check. I would check it first, and then he'd check it, and also just make sure that I was checking the same thing. For the actual event itself, it was basically the same thing. We'd just read through the guidelines and make sure that we weren't doing anything that was wrong or that was not allowed by TED.
Okay, gotcha. What would you say, on a last note here, because I know we're going pretty deep into it now, which I appreciate you taking your time to do this, right? Especially during the holidays. It's just after Christmas, right before New Year's, so thank you for, taking your valuable time to talk here. What would you say, having experienced what you've experienced, being a TEDx speaker, having organized 2 TEDx events of yourself, what would you say to the either aspiring speaker, professional speaker, or the business owner that speaks for business, wants to give a TEDx talk because they want the impact of it, and kind of are dealing with the boundaries between business and TEDx? What would you say to any or all of those people that are on that timeline of, speaking, right? Everything from the very beginning speaker all the way through to the kind of latter half career speaker?
I'd say don't be afraid to take risks, because the best TEDx talks, they come with the most interesting, or the most, just I'd say, out of pocket things. Yeah, so just not being afraid to take risks, I think, is really important.
Is there one other thing that you would say in addition to that?
Well, I already talked about kind of being authentic. I also feel like definitely one thing is making sure running your idea through other people is also really good. Maybe if you're trying to be a speaker, just running your idea through an organizer, if you're already accepted to talk to the event, or just like maybe like a sibling or somebody, that's definitely really important. I think a lot of my talks have definitely been refined because I would actually present them in front of my sister and my parents, and they would be pretty harsh, but they would definitely be giving me some of the best criticism and constructive criticism. Just having someone on your team that's able to say, hey, this is not good, or like this isn't really, being said the way that it should be, or it would be maximizing the impact of. So, yeah.
Did you write your talk before, like you wrote the script of it and then you spoke a memorized script, or did you do a framework of it and then you had the framework memorized, but then filled in the in-betweens of the framework with personal stories and things you knew already? Or how did you kind of go about that process? Because I've noticed a lot of speakers I talk to, they either do one or the other, where they have it really memorized, but then it comes off as very scripted and very inauthentic, even though it is, but doesn't sound that way, versus the framework where it can seem kind of cluttered, but it's super raw, super vulnerable, super authentic. And, both have their positives and negatives, but I noticed this super raw, vulnerable, authentic one tends to be much more, I guess, impactful to the audience. What did you do for your
Yeah.
events?
Initially, I actually tried with a more memorized approach, but I think some of the points you brought up, that's kind of what was the reason why I went to a more just, jot down some bullet points and then kind of just think of what type of things I'd expand on and have it a more raw feel. Because I think my first two talks, I think I was more of a memorized approach. And I felt like my third talk was a lot better because, I didn't go by that scripted approach.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions that I have today. I'll wrap up this recording here. Is there any last thing that you want to mention before we wrap up the recording here?
Not really.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank
I'm sure people will find this valuable as well as high schoolers too, that maybe you're thinking, oh, a TED Talk, I want to do that. That's an amazing thing one day, but maybe they didn't know they can organize it themselves if they, are brave enough to do so. Right. So thank you for, sharing your story and maybe inspiring other high schoolers or just speakers out there too. Right. I think it's awesome.
Thank you for having me on. Really enjoyed
Of
it.
course.